In this article I will continue the analysis of the contradictions between the two accounts of the creation of man in the Torah and attempt to answer the questions: what is the meaning of the naming of the animals, why the naming of animals was necessary. In the Torah we read, Genesis 2 verses 16 to 20, and the Lord God commanded man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat. But of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it, for on the day that you eat thereof, you shall surely die. And the Lord God said, it is not good that man is alone, I shall make him a helpmate opposite him. And the Lord God formed from the earth every beast of the field and every fowl of the heavens, and he brought it to man to see what he would call it, and whatever the man called each living thing, that was its name. And man named all the cattle and the fowl of the heavens and all the beasts of the field, but for man, he did not find a helpmate opposite him. Here we have a straightforward contradiction with the account of the creation of animals given in the description of the 6 days of the creation. In the aforementioned account, the animals were formed after the creation of man. In the description of the 6 days of the creation, animals were made on the 5th day, before the creation of man. In the Torah we read, Genesis 1 verse 24, and God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kind, cattle and creeping things and the beasts of the earth according to their kind, and it was so. It is also very important to pay attention to the passage of the aforementioned account, Genesis 2 verse 19, and he brought it to man to see what he would call it. The seeing of God is the highest possible reaction. It is associated with the Sephira Chokmah, wisdom. That poses the question, why to see? It would be logical for God to hear. In his seminal work The Guide of Perplexed, Maimonides explains that the notion of seeing in the Torah means deep understanding and internalizing the concept. The seeing of God is final in terms of actualization of the information concepts and decision-making. In the Torah, when God is talking to Abraham about Sodom and Gomorrah, we read, Genesis 18 verses 20 to 21, and the Lord said, since the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah has become great, and since their sin has become very grave, stay updated with the latest news. Subscribe to the Jerusalem Post newsletter. Subscribe now. I will descend now and see whether according to her cry, which has come to me, they have done, I will wreak destruction upon them, and if not, I will know. From this we can infer that by naming the animals, Adam began the execution of his main task of the actualization of the information concepts of the creation. This idea is reflected in the principle of the participatory creation, which I put forward in the previous articles. The meaning of the principle is man doesn't exist without creation, creation doesn't exist without man. The principle of the participatory creation has its roots in the Kabbalah, where it is expressed through the notions of female waters and male waters, and it is based on the idea of John Archibald Wheeler about the participatory universe. In his book At Home in the Universe, Wheeler writes, an old legend describes a dialogue between Abraham and God. God chides Abraham, you would not even exist if it were not for me. Yes, Lord, that I know, Abraham replies, but also you would not be known if it were not for me. In our time, the participants in the dialogue have changed. They are the universe and man. The universe, in the words of some who would aspire to speak for it, says, I am a giant machine. I supply the space and time for your existence. There was no before I came into being, and there will be no after I cease to exist. You are an unimportant bit of matter located in an unimportant galaxy. How shall we reply? Shall we say yes, O universe, without you I would not have been able to come into being? Yet you, great system, are made of phenomena, and every phenomenon rests on an act of observation. You could never even exist without elementary acts of registration such as mine? The same idea is reflected in the works of the 7th Lubavitch Rebbe. He writes, Likutei Sichos Volume 35 p. 1 ff. According to the second approach above, that man's naming of the animals was the first act of divine service, it follows that the naming must have accomplished the purpose of all divine service to make the world more subservient to God. This was achieved through the naming which connected the spiritual source of each creature with its existence on the physical plane. Based on the mentioned above, we can definitely say that the naming of animals was the process of the actualization of the information concepts of animals in the information space of creation. Everything seems to be clear, but the question remains, why were these concepts of animals necessary? It's self-evident that no commandment makes sense unless man has a tool to break it. Did Adam have the tool to break the commandment of God? Before we answer this question, let's consider in brief the notion of soul. According to the Kabbalah of information, the soul is the information structure made of concepts with a projection on the information dimension of self. The structure of the soul is similar to the tree of Sphirot, which makes it possible for the soul and the tree of Sphirot to interact with each other. The bigger the projection of the soul on the dimension of self, the bigger, according to the law of likeness, the distance between the soul and the tree of Sphirot. The soul is a dynamic entity. It can move in the information space and acquire new concepts. That is a process we call thinking. In Judaism, there are two commonly accepted categorizations of the soul. I would call them conditionally horizontal and vertical. According to the vertical categorization, there are 5 parts of the soul: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and yaida. The structure of the soul is fractal, which means that, for example, nefesh contains ruach, neshama, etc. Within the frame of this article, we will not consider this categorization in details. Horizontal categorization is best laid out in the works of the Rabbi Shneur Zalman from Liadi, Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, Tanya, Torah, or in others. Alter Rebbe mentions 3 souls: Gedali, animal and sensible soul. The Gedali soul is the set of principles and information concepts within the frame of the commandments of the Torah. It doesn't contain the concept of breaking the commandment. It is situated in the zone of information space of creation determined by the concepts of the commandments of the Torah. The position of the animal soul in the information space is not limited by the commandments of the Torah. It can stay in the information zone of the commandments or in any other zone of the information space, including the side of evil, Sitra Akira. The animal soul contains the concept of breaking the commandment of the Torah. Alter Rebbe didn't explain in details the nature of the sensible soul. He hinted that the sensible soul is kind of neutral and could sway between the animal soul and the Gedali soul. From the mentioned above, it follows that in order to break the commandment of Gd, Adam and Eve must have had the animal soul. That is exactly the second purpose of the process of the naming the animals. The majority of the commentators of the Torah shared the view that the Hebrew names which Adam gave to the animals precisely corresponded to their nature. But the process of naming the animals worked in both directions. Having given precise names to the animals, Adam incorporated the information concepts corresponding to the animals in his soul, hence acquiring the animal soul. Eve was built from the flesh of Adam and received at least part of the soul of Adam together with the animal soul. But there is more to that. In the Torah we read, Genesis 2 verse 20, and man named all the cattle and the fowl of the heavens and all the beasts of the field. Genesis 3 verse 1, now the serpent was cunning, more than all the beasts of the field that the Lord Gd had made. From that follows that Adam named the serpent among other animals, hence he and Eve had the concept of the serpent in their animal souls. Who or what is the serpent? I will expand on that in my next article. To purchase Edward Schifrin's book From Infinity to Man, The Fundamental Ideas of Kabbalah Within the Framework of Information Theory and Quantum Physics, please click here. To purchase Edward Schifrin's book Travels with Sushi in the Land of the Mind, please click here.